unbroken promise to kids of this generation is that they can change their stars, and that is through education. So that is the urgency with which we tackle almost everything, not today, not just today, but almost every day when we're at work here in HISD. And I want to let the public know, as we have with our staffs in the last couple weeks, not this past week, but the week before, that we're on track and we're running hard. We often use sports analogies. I use analogy of the track. Often we are, you know, that bell rang last lap, that's where we are. And we're running hard, we're on pace. How do we know we're on pace? Well, there's two things I wanted to talk about today, and then don't worry, I know you're here, you have a lot of questions, so we'll answer them, but two things that we didn't emphasize before the break. This is a sign that we're on track. You know, people ask me, you know, how do you know you're on track? What's the progress? Well, this is a big sign. Now, maybe you missed it, and so I want to make sure I give it to you. So this is not new education system schools. You know that there'll be 130 next year, and there are about 4,500 teacher positions in those 130 schools, okay, using the NES staffing. And so far, 5,494 HISD teachers have signed up to be considered for those 4,500 positions. And these are teachers who have, they know they're going to have a proficiency screening. In fact, we've already started that. They know this. And so we'll be looking at the results here pretty soon for these teachers for the NES schools next year. That's almost 1,000 more than teachers signed up than we have positions for. And that's not counting the hundreds of teachers outside of HISD who want to work in NES. So this is, you know, this is good news. You talk about progress, a sign of progress. It wasn't long ago, like yesterday, that, you know, some people are saying, well, you know, we're going to never fill the NES, all the teachers are going to leave, and NES just destroys schools and, you know, nonsense like that. Well, this is data that shows we made good progress in both the messaging, but the actual fact of how these schools run, and they're running well enough for a lot of people to want to go to those schools. So that's one, and the second one is this. It's the, I'll get to that slide, it's the principal proficiency. Message of which got lost over spring break, part because the sense making wasn't there. So let me make sense now. 124 principals were told prior to spring break that they've already met the proficiency bar, they already have a winning season. Mid-year they had an 8-0 record or 7-1 record, and so we already know, you know, the odds of them getting a winning season is high. And by the way, we never use words like, for this second group, they didn't make the cut. They failed. They better, you know, shape up. They've been put on notice. We've never said that. That's not in writing. That's not anything I've said. So let me just tell you what they've heard and what I'm telling you today. 124 are already above the proficiency bar, and then the 117 are the ones who we said, you're making good progress, you need to continue to make progress. That's it. And the overwhelming majority, what does that mean? Somewhere between 80 and 90% are going to be asked to be returned. We're going to ask them to come back. That's most of them. So we already have 124. 117, you know, you can calculate the 80 to 90%. Why, I can't give you an exact number because some of that will be up to the executive director and the division soups. 70% of that will definitely be able to stay if they want to stay. So somewhere between 80 and 90% will be asked back. So that's that's good news already. And so we're looking at the second semester. It is like a football game in many ways. It's like, okay, the coach wants a contract in mid-season. Well, no, you don't really get your contract yet until we see whether you have a winning record. In our case, the analogy breaks down because even if you don't have a winning record, most of the ones who don't have a winning record will be brought back also, or be asked to come back, because it's always a choice on both sides. It's the people with the 2 and 14 record, and that's only going to be a small percentage of that group that have that kind of record. So both the teacher data that I just gave and the principal data is actually good news, and it is a little frustrating that some characterizations of it made it sound like it's a bad, like a bad thing, like all the principals will be fired or all the principals were put on notice. That's never what it was. And so, I know that's a characterization out there. I hope you disabuse the public with the actual information that I gave you. If you want, I can go over this slide with you. What this says is that in the proficiency screening 1, the first cut, this is mid-year. That's where 1 is, mid-year. We looked at the people with the winning record already, that there's no doubt they're going to have a winning season, so that's the proficiency bar. But proficiency screening 2, which happens at the end of April, beginning of May, you don't have to be proficient 1, you have to be progressing 2 or higher. So the progressing 2, that group of people, and I can't tell exactly how many that will be, it'll probably be about 25 people. The executive director and the division soup will have the discretion of whether they are asked to return. Anybody proficient 1 and higher will get to come back with regardless, and it's only the people on the bottom tier, 10%, who will not be asked to return. So that's why I'm very comfortable in the numbers, because it's a target distribution, so we already know what percentages will be in each category. So again, one more time, 124 plus 80 to 90% of 117, that's what's going to be asked to, those are the people who will be asked to return. Why doesn't that add up to 274? Because some people were not scored because they came in after November 1st, for example, or they may be on FMLA, or it's something like that. So they're here, but they're not scored. Because we have already had some principal movement, so we're not putting them through this because they didn't start the season off as the coach. I think that's it. Oh, and just in case, and I don't want to conflate the two, but just so you know, these are and have been the evaluation areas for principals. Evaluation does not equal proficiency screening, although the data for the proficiency screening is very similar. So these 4 areas have been shown since June, and they've not changed. The board approved these 4 areas, and they're still the same: 35% student achievement, 30% quality of instruction, 15% action plan, 20% special education. The action plan and special education cannot be assessed until the end of the year. That's how this is devised. Student achievement is assessed mid-year and end of year. And then quality of instruction is assessed throughout the year 4 times. So that hasn't changed. The screener, though, so that people aren't confused, is only about the instruction and achievement. And it uses the same data as you would get mid-year on your principal eval, which is what we gave the principals. Their mid-year data. So I think that's it. Who's got the first question?
So in one of the presentations to principals, there was a 25% figure included for the goal for next year when it comes to the number of campus leaders who are new to HISD or academy graduates. You just said the goal is to have 80 to 90% return. Just trying to square that math.
Yeah, so, there's 274 principals that started the school year. Already we have a certain percentage who have left and are gone. And then we will try to get as many proficient principals as possible, and that's why that's a goal. If we don't hit the goal, we don't hit the goal, and that's okay. But over time, and there's another slide in another presentation that says over time, what we would like for the district to strive for is 80% of our principals being proficient. That's not an unrealistic number to shoot for, since you would hope that every school gets a proficient principal. But if we don't make it and we err on the side of progressing twos coming back, we've invested a lot in our principals. They're making good progress, and so I'm hoping that the executive directors will know them pretty well and will want them back, even if they're progressing. Again, even if they don't have a winning season, they're close, they're moving in the right direction, we can get them there.
Yeah, some community advocates have raised concerns about using the proficiency screening as part of, I guess, an appraisal to bring back principals because it wasn't part of the lead system that was approved by the board earlier this year. So can you respond to that?
Yeah, so, I get that there's both some confusion out there and some concern. That's understandable. But there's several things that would cause that. One is proficiency screening is not the same as evaluation, even though some of the data is the same. In fact, the data from the proficiency screening is data from the evaluation. Principals won't get an evaluation until the end of the school year, probably end of June, beginning of July. That's an evaluation. But there's more than that. I mean, when I hear the concerns, I understand it. I understand that they're not steeped in evaluations or steeped in this type of evaluation. We are changing the paradigm around what a principal evaluation is. And there's some tough questions that I've worked with other districts and other principals on what an evaluation should be. So the fact that people are concerned or confused is totally understandable. Let me just ask some of the questions that people, or raise some of the things that people should consider when they're thinking about an evaluation and why there might be some concern. Should an evaluation be used at all in employment, for employment decisions? 97% of all principals are hired back in this district and probably America. It's not usually an employment decision because it doesn't mean that much. So should an evaluation count? What should be included in a principal's evaluation? Quality of instruction? Yes, no, achievement? If you say quality of instruction, do you mean quality of instruction for all teachers or just a certain set of teachers? Should we have two different evaluation systems in this district? Should we have an evaluation system for one set of schools, an evaluation system for another set of schools? Should it be the same evaluation for all principals? Should the evaluation include special education data? What does the quality of instruction mean? Should an evaluation include that, and should that be a common consideration? In this district, for example, there wasn't any common notion of what quality of instruction is. Now there is, so should that count? Should it not count? Not been counted before. Should people be paid differently on the evaluation system. If you go to an underserved community that's been failing, and now you're the principal, should an evaluation system take that into account? Or are you, like in many places, you go to a high-performing campus, you go there, you get hired there, and all of a sudden you are a great principal? Should the evaluation be designed that way? Or if you go to an underserved, one that's failing a lot, has been failing for years, you're not a great principal, you have to prove that you're a great principal. These are serious questions. And, you know, and people will disagree about that. But you really have to be steeped in this to really understand all the parts of it. We haven't even talked about target distribution. I'm sure someone's going to ask me about that. You know, that's a tough concept. And so that to throw out, you know, things out there that aren't really well studied, that's tough. That makes it harder for everybody to understand. Hope that answered your question a little bit.
I think that some of the reaction to the list that was released that you weren't happy about, but, you know, freedom of the press and all that good stuff, was that some of these are top schools, and so people were shocked to find the principals of top schools that have high graduation rates, have high go on to college and college completion rates. What do you say to them? They just don't have a principal who's doing it your way, but even though these are much wanted schools? I mean, what do you say to them?
So I say what I just said. Let's have a discussion about what an effective principal is and how they should be evaluated. First of all, before I even say that, the assumption that you're making or the intimation is that they're not going to have a winning season. And I think the principals, almost, I already told you, 80 or 90% of them will have a winning season, or at least be asked to be brought back. And of those schools, some specific schools that you're talking about, I think for sure they'll have a winning season. But you know, if the Patriots 2 years ago had a 4-3 record at mid-season, you're going to write them off? We haven't. We've said you're making good progress. You need to continue to show. But you know, we're not going to say you're going to have a winning season until you show that you have a winning season. So yes, those schools are great, and so I'm going to ask the question again. These are, you know, should there be an evaluation of the principal of those schools, or should it look like it's just a pass? Okay, or a proficiency screening, because they will be evaluated. All the principals will. But my assumption is, and I'm going to say it again, the 117 schools, their principals are making good progress. That's what we told them, and they just need to continue. We need another semester. We need the second half of the season. Nobody said they're not going to make it. But, you know, you want me to give everybody, you want me to hire everybody back mid-season, even though we only played half the games. So that's how we need to look at it, and to characterize and say, well, these principals of these high-performing schools aren't going to make it; they're going to be fired. It's like, no, that's not the case. You know, odds are they're going to have a winning season, and we're confident in that.
I think more the question is why were they on the still got to do more list to begin with?
It's not do more. It's continue to do your work. It's do more sounds like you have to do more than what you've been asked to do. No, you have to continue to make progress. All of us do. So, and again, let's look at, I don't need you to answer the question, but I need you to kind of hypothetically answer the question in your head. What does an effective principal look like? We've defined it, and so we need a whole year to assess that. unless you're saying that a certain group of principals don't need to show that.
So I appreciate the comments around like the philosophy of principal evaluation. I think that was some of the community discussion about the philosophy, but the piece that Sam raised, I think was actually a legal memo sent to the board of managers and to some folks at TEA, like alleging that the evaluation policy is implemented in an illegal way or didn't go through the proper mechanisms. Can you respond specifically to that?
Yeah, I think, legal issues should be done between lawyers. That's what I think. We have a good one, and Katasha Woods is our head legal counsel, who's been looking at this process all along. So if there's a legal issue, I would say leave that to the lawyers to do. But the rest of my comments apply to the rest of the document, which is not drawn up. I don't know much about the person who sent it. I'm not sure they're an educator. I'm not sure they're steeped in evaluations, because there are a lot of misconceptions in there, and I won't say misinformation because that sounds intentional. Just misconceptions about it. Again, you have to be steeped in this process, and you have to ask the questions I've asked you hypothetically. And they're not easy questions, and we're going to differ on some of those. Like, should a person be paid off of their evaluation? We can debate that all day, right? Should there be a target distribution? We can debate that all day. I mean, there's lots of things to debate, so no harm, no foul that someone is trying to present a viewpoint that this doesn't seem fair. I get that. That makes sense that some people will think that. But I would say hold off, because you don't really know what the outcome's going to be, right? It's like, I'll give you a non-football analogy, okay, just to help a little bit for people who hate football analogies. Let's say I'm a kid going to college, and I got a year course, and I got to pass this for credit, right? Otherwise, I might not graduate or something like that or get promoted. So it's mid-year, and my professor says, here, he passes out a paper and says, you got a C, or C+, or maybe even a B-. And it's like, well, keep going. You're making progress, meaning you're not going to fail. That's what we are. So can that person get a B or A? Yeah, they still can.
Right. I think my question is like, so your explanations have had like the questions of what should be or shouldn't be, and I think those same debates could be made about, for example, the teacher appraisal system, which over the summer was held up in the court. So I guess I just wanted to hear from you, like, to the communities asking. I think there are community members who are wondering, is this evaluation mechanism legal? So I wanted to hear you. It's almost like a yes or no. Yeah.
Well, there's rarely yes and no's in a very nuanced, complicated system. But let me tell you this, because the question is evaluation system or proficiency screening, because already there's a legal nuance between that, right? Proficiency screening, evaluation system. But the answer to your question is yes, it's legal. And so people who have legal challenges should bring legal challenges to the legal counsel.
Sir, are you concerned about criticism? Are you concerned about criticism?
Am I concerned about criticism? Yeah, one of the reasons why we're doing this is so that we can make sense and avoid some of the criticism or concerns. And and I've said this before, it's like the document, right? Try to find the kernel of truth in whatever people are saying. So let's find that kernel of truth. Let's figure out if we need to act upon it. And what we're doing is we're making more sense. I have a principals training tomorrow. It's not solely about, in fact, not even predominantly about the proficiency screening, but we are reviewing the IRT methodology so that they get more familiar with the spot observations, even though we've been talking about it all year long. So answer to your question is yes.
Before asking, please let me know if you have a question.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, the light is right behind you, so I'm squinting, not just because I can't see.
Jason, Mr. Miles, based on what you said, in my math, it's not my strong suit. So up to 23-ish principals maybe let go. 20% of 117.
So, yeah, it could be as many as that, but remember, it could be as low as 10% of the 117. That would be 17.
So what are the next steps in this process? When is the timing of the proficiency screening phase 2? What will that entail? And when can principals who maybe are in that bottom 10% or 20%, when can they expect to hear word back that they may not be asked to return for the next school year?
Yeah, and first I want to say this is like normal process. I mean, it got built into more than a normal process, but it isn't. What has happened so far? So we collect data all year long on instruction. You guys, maybe some of you have seen it if you've been out in the schools, the spot observation data. We track that every week. And I go out to schools, executive directors go out to schools, and we look at the quality of instruction. It has been a major focus for us all year long. And then we've had 2 independent review teams. We're going to have a 3rd one in April and a 4th one in May. So that's, I mean, that sounds like, you know, something different. No, that's always been the plan. We look at mid-year data, and we call it middle-of-year data, and all schools have turned in earlier we've given to all schools what their mid-year assessments will be. So we took those mid-year assessments. For example, in elementary and middle school, we're looking at NWEA scores. So we took those and we published them, and then, but for the principal's eval, we have their score mid-year. And then we also have their spot observation score. So the proficiency screener was just taking the mid-year achievement and mid-year instruction score. That's it. So I don't want it to seem like this is something special and unique. It isn't. We're going to be looking at instruction still all year long. But to answer your question directly, what will happen next is what we call an independent review team. We'll review every one of the 117 schools, and they will assess the quality of instruction. That's what's going to happen next.
And then when can principals that are in that bottom 10% or 20%, when will they be notified that they may not be returning?
Yeah, it'll probably be in May, after May 6th, somewhere right in that time frame. Which, by the way, is not much different than normal school districts.
And can you talk about how the group of principals that were asked to make improvements, how were they notified or told about this? Was this an email, a conversation with you? How were they told?
Yeah, so one was an email that went to them directly that said, you're making progress, keep doing it. Nowhere in there did it say, you're not making a cut, you better shape up, you're on notice. Nowhere in there does it say you're failing or anything like that. So that's one way. And then the second way was in a meeting with principals to say, what does it mean? So because this is the first year, we have erred on the side of talking to principals more instead of saying, here's your data, right? Here's your spot data from the first team, here's your second spot, here's your achievement data, here's your NWA scores. When NWA came out, we spent time talking to principals saying, this is what it means, right? Because most of them had not taken NWA. So what does 0.6 growth, is that good? Is that bad? So we explained that. The same thing here. You're progressing too. What does that mean? This is the first year? So you're proficient 1. What does that mean? And so we talked through that and explained what that meant. It wasn't an individual, you in your school need to improve this, this, and this. It was just a broad, like, this is what progressing to means, this is what proficient one means, et cetera. So they were told also in a larger group.
So, some of the community members, especially from some of those higher achieving schools that we've talked about, organized a message writing campaign to the board of managers and to other educational policymakers and leaders. And I know you've given the context about the principal evaluation system. You've also told principals that you expect to stay. This message writing campaign makes this explicit demand. It says they're going to vote no on a bond unless you go because they've lost trust due to the principal situation. So I wanted your reaction to that and whether or not you might kind of self-sacrifice in order that the district might have a bond if it seems likely that that measure would fail if you remain.
Yeah, I haven't read that. And yeah.
I'm sure the board of managers have gotten the messages at this point.
Yeah, well, you know, I haven't read it, haven't heard it. Let me just say this. You know, when I took this job, I knew the challenges that it would bring. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the budget. And when I saw how ESSER monies were just given out, salaries raised, and a lot of handouts, money to the staff and programs and all kinds of spending, and then the fiscal cliff, like, here you go, Mr. Miles, you know, the good uncle has been giving out money, and now, you know, I come in and I have to tell the kids, no, you can't have dessert for dinner and dessert for dessert, right? And I have to cut it back. But that's just one example, but there's a whole bunch of examples of what needs to be done to transform an urban district. I knew that there would be sacred cows. The reason why I got hired is because I know these things and I know how to continue to move forward for the sake of the kids and put kids first. I really know what that means, and I know what it takes. And I've hired a staff who also knows what it means and knows what it takes. And we, you know, and the positive, so we're honored, we get to have the courage and the decision-making to lead not just the principals and the executive directors, but the entire community in how to move forward and how to transform. That's the job. And it's going to be tough. It's tough also because the social media environment is really polarized. There's tough, you have as hard a job. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Misinformation is, I mean, it's just hard for people to discern what's true and what's not true. All of that. And that's what we stepped into, just not just me, but my whole team. And that's why we're here. Because we know there's sacred cows. We know that when some people say, and I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about the transformation. We want to make sure that it's equitable. We know that many people don't know what that means. And other districts sometimes say we want greater equity, and they don't put their best performing teachers with their lowest performing kids. Or they say, you know, we want your budget to be, you know, balanced so that we don't lose our AAA rating. Okay, well, do you really know what that means? Do you know what that means in practice? You know, or they want all the things that they've always had, but they want change. So, look, it's going to be tough, and I'm here till someone says I'm not here, but I'm here to the end, and we're gonna transform. One other thing I would say, look, There shouldn't be any sacred cows. That's number one. Number two, there's only so many times you can hear the sky is falling before you really understand it's just rain. How many times have I heard over the last year, how many times have you heard over the last year that, you know, all the teachers are going to leave, that we're ruining, you know, the NES schools? I've heard that a lot. And we got to stay the course. And the community in the end will also understand that. I don't have any doubt about that. So I don't know what the letter you're talking about, but my gut says the community, end of the day, will do what's right for kids if we put kids first. If we put kids first, I think the community will also do what's right for kids.
Just to quickly follow up, the explicit point they're making is they're going to campaign hard to vote no on the bond if you remain. I get the case you just made about the work you're doing. Do you think that you being the person to continue that work is more important than a bond?
Dominic, you know, that's a false choice, right? That's a false choice. We're going to move forward. We're going to make sense. You're going to help me by, it's not your job to help me, but you can help by giving correct information and not saying that 100 principals are going to be fired, right? If you give correct information, if what I say continues to be out there, and we have the social media and we're moving that forward, then we stay this course, the community will come along. There's always going to be other messages. We stay on our message. And we show results for our kids. That's what we're going to do. And I am convinced, and I've said it twice now, I'm going to say it a third time, that the community will make good decisions, including on the bond. If, by the way, the board hasn't even said they want to do it, but let's say they do, including on the bond, if we put kids first and we show that we're actually doing that, and we show that our kids' classroom experience is going to be the same, meaning a good education, they're still going to have access to programming, they still have access to high-quality education, then I suspect the community will also do what's right for kids. That's what I think.
Yeah, we've heard from some principals who were surprised to learn that they were rated less than proficient on the first screening. So is it possible that any of those 117 received that message erroneously, and were you surprised personally by any of, you know, the results from that first screening?
So the 117 list that we have, that we used to notify people, that list is accurate. I'm not saying anything about any other list. So that list is accurate. Was I surprised by, you know, there are 274 principals. I try to work through EDs. I don't know all the principals. I know a handful. And so surprise is not the word. Again, it's like the 49ers having a, you know, 5-3 season to start. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't mean they're not going to win the Super Bowl. So I'm not surprised that, you know, do I wish the 49ers would have had even a more phenomenal start than they did? Yes, but, you know, they're fine.
Were there any differences between the list that you distributed internally and the one that was published by the Chronicle?
Yeah, yes, there were, and that's the last thing I'm going to say about a list that was illegally obtained, not by you, not by the Chronicle, I mean internally.
Sir, if you can answer this question, it's basically in regards of why it was necessary in the first place to analyze and evaluate the teachers and the principals. Why did you consider that as an important thing to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, it's what we do all the time. So It's, let me just answer the question. The answer to the question is, if you're going to have a real evaluation system, a rigorous one that counts, one that raises expectations and holds us a little bit more accountable for how we work. And that's a big if in many places. It's not a big if here. This is what we said we're going to do from the very day one. We're going to have a real evaluation system that looks at the quality of instruction so we can raise the quality of instruction. Yes, we're going to raise the bar. We're going to raise the bar, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. Me, executive director, principals, teachers, to raising the quality of instruction, which is the #1 leading indicator for raising achievement. I think the community would agree with that. So you can't just raise the bar and raise expectations without any data, without any information. And you can't hold people accountable without giving them that information. You know, one of the things that drove me crazy in other districts is when a teacher would come up to me at the end of the year, end of April, and say, you know, I'm going to be non-renewed, and I don't know why. And I would ask, didn't your principal give you any information, any data? Do you have any spot observations? What's your mid-year data look like? And they would be frustrated because they wouldn't get that information from other places. I'm not talking about HISD. So you have to give information if you're going to have an evaluation system. And that's why it's a normal process to give information. What we could have done is just said, just go online and look at it. But because this is the first year, we wanted to make sure they had that information. Okay?
I know the board hasn't voted on it yet, but what do you see as just the major things you'd like to see in the bond issue?
So in the bond, if the board were to go for a bond, we have security issues, single point of entry. We have some classroom doors opening to the outside. We need fencing. We need lights. So security for our schools. #1 priority is what I would say. #2, HVAC, heating and cooling systems, so that we have as cool a building in the summer and as warm a building on the cold days. You know that we have really bad or broken systems in many of the schools for HVAC. So that's a second priority. And then third would be some of our schools are so old and the repairs are so, there would have to be so many repairs. We actually need a new building or huge renovation for some of our schools. In that bucket is also schools that have so many trailers, modulars. And to me, that's not right. If it's an old modular, there are new modular constructions now, but you know what I mean. The old modulars, that your grandfather's modular. We have kids in some of those type of classrooms, and that doesn't seem fair to me.
Well, mine was just super quick, so I'll hand it to someone else. But it was just, could you remind us the ballpark that you were shooting for?
Yeah, let me. I want to wait on that until the board has had a chance to chew on that.
Safe to say multi-billion-dollar bond package?
Yeah, multi-billion.
One more question. Another question?
Yeah, actually, I have one on the NES. The numbers you gave us signed up to teach at NES schools. Was that drawn from intent to return data? And if so, do you think it's accurate given that it's one, non-binding, and the union told teachers to say they intend to return regardless of if they do?
No, the number's fairly accurate. It's not just the intent to return. They had to also say, I want to work in an NES to be considered. So, and to be, it's all of the above, right? It's NES, schools that are coming in NES, but also other HISD teachers who want to work in NES. And they know if they don't sign up, they're going to miss out on the screening and the possible job. So, yeah, that number's accurate. Even if it's off by a little bit, it's 1,000 more than we need, and we're not even talking about outside the district. When I went to the job fair 3 weeks ago on a Saturday, we already had a couple hundred people wanting to work in NES. And that's, you know, that was the first job fair. It wasn't as advertised as we wanted it to be, and so we're going to have no problem filling the NES positions. Is that it? All right, hope everybody got their questions answered. Thanks, talk to you later. See you tomorrow, some of you.